Forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads. Prefer a dunk. And expect nothing but the best. This was the Big Ten. Now this is Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
And we made it. It is game week here on Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace with my never partner, always co-host, Aaron McIntire. Good to see you, brother. We've got a little fall nip in the air at the exact same time. I don't know. I'm feeling it. It is the most wonderful time of the year. How excited are you right now?
You know, usually I don't even consider doing my yearly or my football season, usually once or twice during football season, pots of chili until like the middle of October. Mm-hmm. I have half a mind to actually do that this Saturday. I mean, that's how fall it feels here in late August. Very uncommon.
It is. Usually these are some of the hottest days of the year here in Iowa. We're going to take it. And it's going to be nice and seasonal for a while. I saw one day next week a high of like 66 even. So I'm totally down for the ambiance as well as for the games. But first, we have the second leg of the BTN Camp Tour and those 8 teams to go over, Aaron. We're going to do that here on this week's edition of Bigger Ten. And then we'll have something to say about really the only game that really matters this week in our league. One of the biggest season openers in the history of our league. Number 1, Texas against number 3 and defending national champion Ohio State on Big Noon Saturday, a massive game. We will break that down a little bit later on. But let's finish off with what the BTN Camp Tour guys had to say about the rest of the Big Ten. Let's start with Wisconsin. They seemed to think that the vibe and culture was noticeably improved, but they were also very concerned about facing perhaps the toughest schedule in the country. And I think they feel a little more secure talking about the weaknesses of teams who are facing very difficult schedules because they can deflect to that. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to say, hey, this team sucks. They can say, hey, they're getting better. They're trying hard. It's a little engine that could. They're giving it their all, Captain. But if you looked at that schedule and kind of, you can keep deflecting to that. And that schedule is an absolute bear starting in week 3 with a road game in Tuscaloosa, and it doesn't let up pretty much from there. So what do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, it was difficult with Wisconsin. They were talking about how they're going back to running the ball. It's going to be kind of the ethos of the Alvarez years, but with, window dressing of a more modern appearing offense. So that, again, how much to take of that? Culture changes are good. Also, if you get punched in the mouth once or twice early in the season, those cultures, those newly rebuilt or newly reestablished cultures, they can crack really quickly. So I don't really think there's much to say about Wisconsin. That is this a big deal? Maybe. This was kind of the comment that I focused in on talking about the defensive line. They only had 3 guys that weighed 300 pounds. Now they have 9 guys who weigh 300 pounds, up front. It's like, that's great. Can they also play football? That's kind of so there were a lot of comments like that with Wisconsin and a lot of the rest of the teams as well. Mm-hmm. So I remain pretty dubious about Wisconsin's prospects this year. I mean, I think it was Dave Revson. I can't remember who it was who made this comment. I don't write everything down. There's 18 teams for goodness sake. But one of the panelists made a comment of those first 2 games in the non-conference are going to be really, really important for this team. Important as in like getting their stuff together, or important because they're not going to get that many more wins the rest of the schedule?
And the answer is probably yes.
Yes. So again, not too much to glean from Wisconsin.
Let's talk about Illinois, because I thought this was one of the more fascinating of the 18 episodes. So Howard Griffith thought that this was the best offensive line Illinois has had in the 19 years they've been going there in the Big Ten Network, and looking at who's returning and the resumes of those players, I don't think you have to be an alum like Howard to come to that conclusion. But what I found fascinating is throughout this episode, there was a very strong undercurrent from Jerry DiNardo. I think he was definitely concerned about how this team was going to handle unprecedented preseason expectations. Remember, after that breakthrough year in 22, they were everybody's darling heading into 23, completely fell on their faces. Illinois has never had back-to-back 10-win seasons in the history of its program. So this is uncharted waters for them. And he also thought that they quote, still need developing, end quote, at running back and wide receiver, which is kind of, if you know the language and how to read between the lines, kind of code for, I'm not sure the talent is there that maybe you think is there, right? What did you think when you watched this episode? Because I thought it was kind of fascinating.
I just think that this depends on if this is Wisconsin and Brett Bielema happens to be its coach, or this is Brett Bielema's Wisconsin, because I have a lot of confidence in Brett Bielema in the Big Ten, and I have a lot of confidence what he brought to the table, not only at Wisconsin, but what he's doing with Illinois, which looks a lot similar to what he did at Wisconsin, which, still had a lot of Barry Alvarez influence, but I think a lot of him as a coach. If this is Illinois and Brett Bielema happens to be its coach, I think DiNardo's consternation there about whether or not they'd be able to handle these expectations, I think that has some validity. If this is Brett Bielema's Illinois and this is really his program, I'm not very concerned.
Okay.
So this late in camp, however, concerns about the skill position players when you're comparing them to kind of a contemporary or somebody you think is kind of at the same level with, which is Iowa, which apparently their running back room wowed the BTN crew, and that was earlier in camp. I guess I would be a little bit concerned if I were an Illinois fan, but I'm not super concerned after what I heard from them.
Okay, let's talk about Northwestern then. Dave Revson noted a very improved offensive line. Jake Butt thought this might be the most improved team at quarterback in the entire conference. I don't know about that. I think probably Michigan's going to get that. But it was clear he was not impressed with their skill guys. You could just watch his. And Jake's kind of new at this. But Jake is extremely articulate, by the way. I mean, he's got national.
He's getting better. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got national analyst potential, like another former Michigan Wolverine, Devin Gardner, has become for Fox. But he's still kind of learning the BTN Camp Tour lingo because he's kind of used to being very blunt, right? But I think he was pretty clear he was underwhelmed, to say the least, by the skill players surrounding the new quarterback there, Preston Stone, the SMU transfer, who was very good for SMU 2 years ago, got hurt right before the conference championship game, and a young man named Jennings came in for him, and the rest has kind of been history. But Preston Stone was very good throughout much of the 2023 football season, and he is now Northwestern's quarterback. So that is a clear upgrade there. The question is, how good are the players around him? And Jake Butt did not seem all that impressed to me.
Normally when I hear most improved, fill in the blank, I want to hear, well, who's your least improved? Fill in the blank, and we're never going to hear that. I don't think that's fair in this situation because you're right, Preston Stone was a very good quarterback for SMU a couple of seasons ago. And, just in some of the highlights that we got to see, he looks, and the coaches said he makes his reads really, really well, which is something you want to hear and you expect to hear from coaches. But I do think he'll be a big upgrade for them. It should not be too much of a surprise that Northwestern is lacking at the skill positions. This is not a new phenomenon, and they got into that offensively, even going back before Fitz was fired. By the way, we should make mention of that because we didn't last week.
Yes,
Pat Fitzgerald absolutely done dirty by
completely
his school.
completely
exonerated, completely done dirty by the mob, completely done dirty by his own freaking alma mater. And
members of the media from his alma mater, too, that have some highfalutin platforms like ESPN, for example.
Before this and after this, all that I've ever heard of Pat Fitzgerald is how much of a good dude that he is. He was absolutely done dirty. And they have egg on their face, to say the least, over there. They were forced to write a statement saying they wish him the very best in the years to come. Mm-hmm. That's code for we got off easy here with the settlement that they reached. So Northwestern's stupid mistaken decision is going to be Iowa's gain, I'm sure, in the very near future as Pat Fitzgerald either comes on as analyst or takes over for Kirk Ferentz. That has not been announced yet, but that's what a lot of Iowa fans are speculating.
I could see that. That's a great fit, by the way.
His son's already on the team. So anyway, back to Northwestern.
Well, let me comment on this for a second since you brought it up, if you don't mind. Northwestern, I believe Pat Fitzgerald was either a player or a coach on every 10-win season Northwestern's had in its history but one. He is the most famous character and towering figure in all of Northwestern football history. To divorce him so publicly and then wreck your program. This was a consistently competent to competent plus program for pretty much the entirety of Fitz's tenure there. And then to blow up your program, Aaron, right with more expansion coming, the league getting tougher, USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. If you are a second-tier program in our league, that was not a moment to break up the stability of your program. That's exactly what they did. That's a beautiful stadium there that they're building that's going to open next year. It's going to be a great host site for concerts and other things.
And for opposing fans.
I don't know that their football program will ever recover. When you look at how much more difficult it is to be relevant now than it used to be, there's no more Big Ten West. You're playing in a tougher, deeper league. They may never recover from what they did here and tried to do to Pat Fitzgerald. And it is one of the most mind-blowing self-owns I have seen in my time, either as a sports fan or even covering this for a living. I've never quite seen, or not seen at least too many self-owns like this, and it may have generational consequences for that athletic department and football program.
Yep, only the most educated people could make a decision that's stupid. So that's Northwestern. However, this year's squad, I do think there is one subtle thing. I kind of mean this seriously. I kind of mean this tongue-in-cheek. That makes me think that this is legitimately better than their squad last year. They spent a marked amount less time talking about their new stadium than they did on last year's BTN
That's a good point.
Camp Tour. So I do think partly tongue-in-cheek
Yep.
and partly serious. They did talk about it a little bit. I do think that's an indication they at least respect them enough to talk about the game in between.
Look at you. You could now go on the BTN Camp Tour. Look at you finding silver linings playbooks, even in Northwestern's Camp Tour special. There you go, young man. I'm proud of you.
What can I say?
You did it.
Now, this next school and the next few schools we're talking about, I'm not sure. I don't think I speak Yogi quite yet.
Yeah, he's interesting.
I like both him and Ashley Adamson. Ashley's very, very good.
Yep.
He's very well spoken.
She's very polished, man.
Yeah, I just don't think I can I don't think I can read between the lines with him yet.
Yeah, I agree. Because he's like a Pac-12 evangelist, but a USC guy. So on the other hand, the other kind of Pac-12 guy that's gotten into the national media, Jeff Schwartz, he's just an Oregon pimp. Doesn't care about anybody else. It just pimps Oregon. No matter what the topic is, Oregon's going to come up. He's going to talk about his alma mater, Oregon. Where Yogi seems to be more apostolic. Like he wants to talk about the broader West Coast schools. So I'm not really quite sure how to read him yet. I'm with you. But let's wrap this up with Oregon. Despite perceptions that the Ducks have among the easiest schedules in the league, Yogi actually kept bringing up that they have 4 games with teams coming off of byes throughout the course of the season. He also thought, though, that this was still among the most talented teams in the league despite the personnel losses. But here's the thing to remember. Last year, they made a concerted effort of having the West and Eastern crews mix and match. So like Yogi went to Penn State's camp tour, if you go watch that from a year ago. He was there. This year, they did not do that, right? And so Yogi and Ashley covered the West teams, and Revson and Howard covered the East teams. And I think DiNardo did mostly the teams in the East, but also set out quite a few of these this year too. So I don't know that statement carries as much weight for me. I mean, listen, I can read the 24/7 composite talent ratings. I'm pretty confident Oregon. I don't have to visit Oregon's fall camp, Aaron, to know they're one of the most talented teams in the conference. Amen. I can read the recruiting reports, But from a professional analyst standpoint, Yogi hasn't been to all these other camps out east here like he was a year ago. So, that doesn't carry as much weight with me, just a beyond generic assessment, just because we know how well Dan Lanning recruits.
So having said that, I don't quite speak Yogi yet. This is kind of an indication of that. I'm not sure if this is he's concerned about this, but trying to put a good spin on it, or this is just genuinely something that stood out to him. He did talk about Dante Moore and an interception that he threw in practice, and he wanted to get down to see how he responded, and he said he responded great. Is that an indication that Dante Moore was throwing picks all over the place, or that he's just genuinely impressed with how he picked himself up and carried on? I think I heard that in that episode, so that's one thing that I'm trying to struggle through. Having said that, my own perception and the BTN visit to Oregon didn't necessarily change this much for me. Oregon, kind of like Ohio State, just maybe at definitely at a lower level, I think, it does not concern me. Lower level meaning they may win a
top
game.
Top 5% instead of top 1%?
Correct,
yeah.
Yes. So I'm not worried about Oregon again this year. They're loaded basically everywhere. Are they going to contend for a title again this year? It's going to be more difficult, I think, than it was last year. I do think, they're playing the FCS runner-up to start things off. I think they played Idaho State last year and struggled with them.
Mm-hmm.
I could see a little bit of a gelling process for them, but I'm not worried about Oregon.
We keep forgetting Dante Moore is maybe the most forgotten player in our league heading into the year. I mean, this was a big-time recruit, number 2 overall recruit, number 2 overall quarterback recruit, I should say, consensus 5-star. He was getting offers from the 8th grade on. He was from the same area as Bryce Underwood. He was kind of Bryce Underwood before Bryce Underwood. So I think we've kind of forgotten about him and how high his recruiting profile was. So now's his chance to remind us starting this Saturday. We've got 4 more teams to discuss. We'll do that here in a moment. All right, back here on Bigger 10, down to our final 4 schools from the BTN Camp Tour. Let's stay out west. Let's talk about UCLA. Yogi Roth said that he thought the overall talent on the offense, especially at quarterback, with Nico there, and I still can't pronounce the last name. Iamaleava, is that how? Iamaleava, thank you. Definitely upgraded over where it was a year ago. He did express concern that there's just too many new players on the roster, especially with a key swing game against Utah to open the season there that could ultimately determine your bowl eligibility. So I thought that they clearly thought some progress was made. Unsure yet, though, of what Nico does to add to the ceiling of the team.
So on the positive side, I do think it's pretty obvious that Nico Iamaleava is an upgrade at quarterback for them. So that's good. You would expect that. You would want that from the most important position on the field. However, again, I don't speak Yogi quite yet. That's the 3rd time I've said this. I did find it concerning, that comment about all the new players, because that could be an observation of, wow, we're late into fall practice here, and this team does not look like it's gelling right now. Yep. So that doesn't mean that they couldn't, become cohesive, by the 3rd or 4th game of the season, and, adding that in with the concern about opening up against Utah. I do think there is some cause for concern there. Overall, though, again, we think that they should be better, with the most important, position on the field being what it is, and Nico Iamaleava. Despite everything that happened in Tennessee, I still think he's a good quarterback. But I do think that there is some consternation there, especially early on.
I agreed. Let's talk about their crosstown rivals there at USC. Roth noted for the first time since Lincoln Riley has been there, the entire offensive line will be likely comprised of guys recruited by the Trojans and developed there. As well as that the overall size on the defensive front is bigger and more improved from a year ago when they just got ran on too often. But he also did, and this is his alma mater, he did express concerns about their overall depth. And that does matter, particularly in our league in the SEC, where the physical grind week to week, even if it is a team that you can just out-athlete on the perimeter, the physical grind week to week can wear you down if the depth is not there. So I thought that was fascinating for even one of their own alums to highlight that.
That would be concerning to me if I were a USC fan, because this is the Big Ten. This is definitely, as you just pointed out there, this is a league where you just cannot afford to not have some sort of competent depth behind your Freudian slip there. Some competent depth behind your frontline guys. As we were taping this on Wednesday, I can't remember the name of the organization again that put this out, but there was a consulting group that put out an estimated, based on either reported or what they're hearing behind the scenes, kind of rundown of how each of the 4 power conference, the big two and the little 2 power conference teams spend on their teams. And the SEC and the Big Ten, by far and away, above the Big 12 and ACC, spend a lot on defense. And I think this underscores in terms of NIL and I think the new house settlement stuff. I think that was the pretext for this. So that does underscore what you're talking about there. Mm-hmm. You definitely have to have, if you're going to have depth somewhere, if you had to pick between offense and defense, you would have to choose defense. You want it everywhere, but you would definitely want to choose defense. And the fact that Yogi, alma mater, he said that about his depth or about their depth all over the place. I think that would be concerning to me.
No, hey, maybe you have one of those years where you get a good injury look, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. But you can't count on that when you're playing in our league. Now, those 9 games, and then you throw in, they play Notre Dame every year on top of that as well. All right, let's go to East Lansing and Michigan State. And I thought this was also one of the more fascinating trips too, because you saw something from Howard Griffith you rarely see. He is not the one to pour the cold water, but he did. In fact, he said, quote, "This is going to be a tough year for them."
Alarm bells.
That's a quote. Okay?
Alarm bells.
As a whole.
And the next thing that you're about to say.
Yeah, and as a whole, the crew thought the offense looked more improved
That's also
than the
alarm
defense.
bells. That's also big time alarm bells. Both of those things.
The first one I think is obvious. Explain why you think the second one is alarm bells for
Well,
you.
They've talked about this before. At this point in camp,
the defense is ahead of the offense.
It's always ahead of the offense because they know what's coming every single play. And if you're sitting there or standing there and you're saying, "Hey, it looks like the offense is more improved than the defense," that's a yikes to me anyway.
Especially, remember, this was the first school that was post-camp and in game week prep.
Yes.
Michigan State and Michigan were already in game week prep when they went there. Those are the final two schools. So this is with them in game week prep. And folks, you've never watched an opening weekend in college football ever where you did not hear an announcer say, the defense is usually ahead of the offense. It's a season opening trope every single season. So to go to their game week prep now after they've been through an entire camp and still come to the conclusion that the offense is ahead of the defense when the defense, as Aaron says, has known now for 16 practices what is coming every single day. That is interesting. Finally, Michigan. This was the last stop. Griffith thought this was the best running back room in the league, and Jake Butt thought this was the best linebacker room that they saw in the league. That duo in Rebson, they were clearly impressed with the defense overall. They also were all very excited about Bryce Underwood, but there were rightfully, I thought, a lot of questions about how is a true freshman who had just turned 18 a couple days before they arrived. So he's 18 like Matt Stafford was 18, was 18, which means when he goes into the league in 3 years, like Stafford, he's going to be only 20 years old. All right. So they did question, how is he going to perform in key road games like Oklahoma in week 2? And I don't know how you can't question that. I don't know how you could possibly know that. And you can be as poised and polished as you want in the spring game or in practice, but it's not one of the legendary cathedrals in the history of our sport, 9 o'clock Eastern, and it's 100 degrees, even with the sun down, and everybody's screaming and yelling at you, and your last game was for Belleville High School at Ford Field in front of, friends and family for the state championship. It's just not the same thing. And there's just no way to know how someone will respond and react in that situation, which is why I thought they were wise to keep bringing that up, because it is a giant caveat. There's a chance he is Trevor Lawrence. He is Herschel Walker. He's Jeremiah Smith. He's Andy Katzenmoyer. Some of these guys that are legendary true freshmen in the recent or past history of college football. There's also a chance he's just a very talented freshman and the moment will be too big for him. And I just don't know how you will know until we know.
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I think Revson said towards the end of the broadcast, there's a lot of question marks with this team, but everything you just said, they observed as well. I think they just want to see them in person, in live action. And don't we all, not just with Michigan, but with every other team that we've talked about. You were talking about on Michigan podcast yesterday, Bryce Underwood, whether this is arrogance or confidence. You've never seen a freshman quarterback like me before. I'd say I would be concerned if he weren't saying things like that. If I were a Michigan fan, don't you want somebody who has a high ceiling? He's never going to reach that ceiling if he's not just a little bit cocky. I mean, there has to be, if somebody comes up to you and says, I'm going to go fly today, you'd probably say you're out of your mind. You're very arrogant. You can't fly. Right. But if they tell you, I've got all the tools, I've got an airplane, and I've got my pilot's license, well, that makes sense. It does require, things like flying require a little bit of arrogance and cockiness, so long as you can back them up with the right tools and abilities. So I'd be concerned if he were not confident like that. But this goes back to what I was talking about, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. You don't want his confidence to be shaken to the point where it gets in his head for the rest of the season. True. I don't know how you delineate or put a concrete line on what that is. You may not be able to. But I hope, if I'm a Michigan fan, I hope they let him just unleash him this first game, get a lot of confidence, and then maybe play it a little bit closer to the vest against Oklahoma. Just, test him out, put him out there in different situations, but don't let things unravel too quickly on that dude. I think if it does, and it may not, it may be the second coming of Trevor Lawrence or what's his face, Cam Newton. I think that the reason why a lot of us are nervous, just speaking for myself. Because you're all neurotic. Well, because, I wear a size 36 pant and XL shirt.
Okay. So I know that I can't talk like that. All right. So when we hear someone else talk like that, we're like, you better really be that good if you're going to talk like that, right? You know. And let's also understand we've not really been a quarterback centric program, you know, and so we're not used to necessarily having a quarterback just come right in, kind of grab the reins and say, yeah, this program's mine. I got this. It's just not, even great Michigan teams, that's just not how it worked around here, per se. You know, Tom Brady was splitting time his senior year, for goodness sakes.
I hope you don't try to stay that program for him. If you've got a Maserati, you're doing the kid no favors.
I agree
if
with
you
that.
Try to shoehorn him into being a game manager.
I agree with that. Just if you give the kid the keys to the Porsche, you better just hope he's got a full license, not a student one. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's a Porsche. You know, but I hear you.
I've always thought of Porsches as douche cars. That's why I said Maserati, but whatever.
Well, lots of Michigan fans are douches. I'm one of them, so I say that proudly. All right, we'll come back and let's talk about. It's not the game. That's at the end of the year, but it's a big game. We'll do that next. X-Poll results. You make the call. One of the biggest season openers in college football history. Number 1 versus number 3 in the AP poll. We've been doing preseason AP polls for 75 years. It's the first time ever the preseason AP number 1 team has been an underdog in the season opener. 59% of you taking Ohio State, 41% of you taking Texas. That's a little bit more even given how lopsided Big Ten our audience is than I would have expected. Which brings us to our feedback of the week from Joe, who says somehow Ohio State pulls it off. Not sure Arch Manning is ready for the shoe at noon. So, Aaron, let's break this game down. And
I disagree with the first sentence because I agree with the second sentence. The more that I think about this game, I actually think that it's not going to be close in terms of these not close would be like 10 points, 2-possession game. I do think Ohio State's going to take care of business. You're still just talking about Arch Manning making his first real big-time start for Texas as the official starting quarterback. That's a big deal. We think he's a really good quarterback. It's also on the road. It's also in the heat. Well, I guess it's going to be good weather on the weekend as well. But it's on the road at the shoe against Ohio State, who is replacing a lot. But it's still Ohio State, as I've talked about. That's just a lot to ask. That's just a lot to ask for any quarterback, even if it's the second coming of Peyton Manning or Cam Newton or Bryce Underwood or whatever you want to talk about. So I'm pretty confident in Ohio State this weekend. So I just think there's too much working against Texas. I do think it's going to be a defensive slugfest for at least the first 2.5 quarters. And then I think maybe Ohio State opens it up a little bit in the second half and kind of cruises to a somewhat comfortable win.
I think that's pretty good analysis. I'm actually, 2 of my win total best bets that we put on our Patreon page back in June are both season win total unders on both of these teams. They were 10.5 at the time, and I'm like, well, one of them's going to take a loss right away to the other. My power ratings actually have Texas not even the number 1 team in the SEC, but the 3rd best team in the SEC. My power ratings have Alabama and Georgia ahead of them. So I think Ohio State's got a ton to replace. I'm way more concerned about the coordinators they have to replace than the players. Not that they weren't great players, but we've been watching Ohio State replace great players you and I's entire lives. Those 2 coordinators might have been the best coordinator duo in all of college football. I think there's clear downgrades in replacements. I think almost anybody they could have gotten would have been downgrades. But you're replacing Chip Kelly with an offensive coordinator that you took the play calling duties away from to hire Chip Kelly once before. And I've got an up close and personal look at Matt Patricia's act, so I'll be fascinated to see how that works. But I do think Texas is replacing 4 starters on its offensive line. May have to go with a backup at tackle because of an injury. There's a ton of question marks I think both teams have to start the season with a game of this magnitude. So to me, I'm just giving the Occam's razor analysis. One team can just throw it up to Jeremiah Smith. That's why they're going to win. When in doubt. Hey, Julian Sand is 5'8" or something and can't see. He's like Drew Brees back there in his first game, but he can't see over the line. Hey, dude, just throw the ball up to Jeremiah Smith. He'll go get it. Just when in doubt, throw it up to him. And that's the one thing I don't think Texas has And maybe we find out they do. Maybe we find out CJ Baxter, who was a 5-star recruit for them at tailback, he's fully back after a year off with the knee injury, and he can be that caliber of player. But as of right now, and we haven't seen it yet from Arch, and maybe he can be that right from the jump here. He's been preparing for 30 months to be that player. But one team I know for sure can moss the other team when in doubt, and that's why I'm picking Ohio State. They can moss the other team, and as far as I know, Texas can't do that.
Yeah, they're pretty similar across the board except for at that position. Mm-hmm. And I think, we might not be a Porsche or a Maserati. I think we would complete a few passes to Jeremiah Smith.
And that's Texas receivers don't suck.
No.
All right. Jeremiah Smith is a superhero, like literally a character out of a comic book, right? Just a different level of player. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, comment right here on YouTube or iTunes. Apple, that is. All those things help us to find more Big Ten fans just like you. We appreciate when you do that, so thank you. You can also follow us on X in between episodes. And now, of course, with the return of games, returns my whiny in-game tweeting or posting on X. You don't want to miss it. I hear from people all over the country how much they love it. I hear that every single year, how much you guys really can't wait to read my whiny laments on X during games. So thank you. Appreciate the kind words.
Thanks for reminding me to mute Michigan podcast.
And Bigger 10, yes.
And Bigger 10.
So, at Bigger 10 is the account you'll be muting on Saturdays. All right. Until next week, actually tomorrow. We're back tomorrow with our very first confidence picks of the season. For Aaron McIntire, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you then.